with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, June 8th, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps and steps and steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Professor of Sociology from Brooklyn College, Alex S. Vitale, on the end of policing. Also on the program today, protests continue across United States cities and towns in an unprecedented fashion. Meanwhile, the Minneapolis City Council members announced their intent to disband.
Thank you for calling in.
To disband the MPD. And in New York, Bill de Blasio announces anemic police guts. Nationally, Democrats unveil sweeping police reform package, and it's actually pretty good. It's not great, but it's pretty good. Bill Barr parses and parses the words tear gas and the words get her done. Polls show an expanded Biden lead. He's now over 50%. That's important. Trump is wilting. Meanwhile, Tom Cotton is waiting in the wings as his fiasco of an op-ed gets a New York Times editor fired. And 19% of Americans have put bleach on food to kill the coronavirus. Congrats, America. Ithaca, New York could be the first city in the country to cancel rent during coronavirus. In a new report, shutdowns prevented 60 million infections as New York City begins to open up. But 8 states, including California and Texas, had record number of new cases. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to what I believe is, I guess this is actually our second show in the month of June. Time has just flown by over the past couple of months in a blur, one day running into the next. Kids asking me, what day is today? But glad you could join us. Very excited to have Alex Vitale with us. Couldn't be more apropos on a day where the Democrats in the House unveil their police reform bill, when over the weekend, Minneapolis City Council members announced that they intend to get rid of the MPD. De Blasio announces $1 billion worth of cuts over, I think, over the course of 4 years. It's a start, and people are still out there. So very exciting in that regard. New York City has gone into phase one. Very important milestone, I think, in many respects, because, of course, New York City was the epicenter, at least in wave one. We will see if there is and when there will be a wave two. A couple of corrections I want to make before we continue on. One is we played a video, I guess this was on Thursday or Friday, of a man that we said was an FBI agent getting arrested by cops. And when they checked his ID, they had to realize that he was not the person they were looking for. That was actually a video from 2019. I believe it was in Minneapolis. And that man was not an FBI agent. I don't know any more details beyond that, but I just wanted to make that clear. And we did not clip that video because of that. And the other thing I want to clear up, at the very least, I want to add, I don't know if this resolves it, but this is an explanation. We saw a video, and I don't know when this was. It was a couple of days ago as well, of two what appeared to be law enforcement officers unloading bricks from the back of their vehicle. And the people who were videotaping it thought, like, what the heck is going on? According to series of tweets issued by the Northeastern University Police Department in Boston, which patrols the campus, they said that the officers had collected the bricks from a damaged sidewalk nearby and brought them to headquarters. They were in the process of unloading the bricks when the video was filmed. This is according to the NUPD. The user who made the video deleted it, saying she was not interested in spreading this information. The only thing I can tell you about that is I am familiar with that part of Boston. There are sidewalks that still have brick in some of those areas. So it's conceivable. So just wanted to let you know that. Now that is, it's up to you whether you take the word of the Northeastern NUPD, but it sounds reasonable to me. That doesn't mean that in all the other instances, there aren't instances where bricks were in places where it's unclear why they would be there. But I just wanted to correct the record in that regard. Let's get to this. Apropos, the right is freaking out, and maybe, I guess, they're hoping that this can end up being some type of, and I suspect we're going to see this pivot, but we have talked about why there has not, the right has not been successful in exploiting these series of protests and everything that's going on as a law and order issue. And in fact, the Democrats have come out with, like I said, and we'll go through this maybe with Vitale, a proposal to reform police departments in some manner. But it's quite possible they think this is the best way to run this election because Donald Trump is in sort of desperate measures right now. And who knows? But usually it's Fox and Friends that gives you a little preview of what the talking points are going to be this week. And here is Brian Kilmeade. He can't even believe that we're talking about defunding the cops.
This is the craziest conversation and debate we've had in decades. Defund the police, eliminate police force, come in with a peace force, come in with counselors, call 311, not 911. If you want to reform, you want to talk about it, you put law enforcement at the table, and we talk, nobody's happy about what happened. 8 out of 10 Americans are more concerned about police conduct than they are about the riots. I get it. I saw the Wall Street Journal poll as well. But this is insane to take 700 to 800,000 people and tell them, go do something else, hand in your uniforms, we got this. Senator Tim Scott weighed in.
Well, I'd say on the defund police, what a ridiculous idea. It is not an idea whose time has come. It should never come. The absolute nation requires law and order. We need order in our streets, and the easiest way to have that is to have a strong presence of character-driven law enforcement officers.
What the heck is character-driven?
So with Senator Tim Scott saying Trey Gavin came back.
Pause it. Like, first off, there's two things I want to just mention. He also, Kilmeade, lived through the debate as to whether Barack Obama was a U.S. citizen, just to put it in context. But the idea of like character base, I don't even know, Aaron. Like we gotta make for better character. We gotta better cops with better characters.
It's cops that read Dickens.
That's a new one. We just need character-based cops. Maybe it's like a cosplay thing. Anyways, continue.
With and said, you have sexual abuse, you have child abuse going on, domestic abuse, you're going to send in a social worker. Good luck with that. By the way, social workers don't get paid enough. Now we're going to ask them to do this. That'll be fantastic. Number three is the people who are in the NYPD, about 38,000, they're not living in the lap of luxury. They're making about 41,000 to start going through the academy. With our tax system, we all live it. A third of that goes right out the window to various taxes. So they're barely making ends meet. And now they got to get a second job. Now you're going to take less stuff away. They had 13 cop cars destroyed, 60 damaged, over 300 hurt. And your answer to that is let's take more stuff away, make them reuse their uniforms, different shoes, take away their handcuffs. This is just insane. I cannot believe we're having this conversation, Steve.
Well, I can't believe that we're having this conversation either, partly because we're not. And I think we'll get more details when we talk to Alex Vitale in a minute. But the idea of like they can't have shoes. I think the whole point is that yes, there aren't enough social workers, and so what we'll do is give a lot of those cops an opportunity to become social workers, and at the same pay. I think social workers would be very happy to have cop pay, frankly. And to have those pension and benefits. I think that's... Go ahead.
Here's what character-based policing might look like, I think.
That's... well, I mean, how could you not, first of all, listen to the crime dog in that situation? And also, the crime dog comes up to your car, it's going to be a lot less tense of a situation if they pulled you over for a ticket or they come in and they say, please, everybody calm down. It's man's best friend. So I think that actually there may be something to that. Now, of course, here is Ainsley Earhart. I mean, this is why I'm like thinking this is what they're going to roll out this week, because when the two of them sort of chime in and they have their own sort of like special talking points, you really get the sense that maybe Ainsley was really thinking about this over the weekend. Or maybe they just got a memo when they came in the morning. Here's Ainsley Earhart talking about how dangerous it's going to be if people can't call 911.
You know, when you look at what the mayor's doing in Minneapolis, he's going against what the majority of the city council wants to do. And he was on that stage and he got booed on the stage, but it took a lot of guts for him to do that because many people in his community are worried. What's going to happen? Who do we call if there's an emergency situation? What about domestic violence? What about child abuse? What about murder and rape and looting? Who do you call? You call 311 instead of 911. You know, if you call 311 in the city, oftentimes those are questions about Central Park or park in the city or garages or paying for parking. It's not necessarily if I have an emergency, can you come and help me? So there are a lot of questions here. Makes a lot of people nervous. Yes, there needs to be reform and there needs to be change, and those conversations need to be had. The president's doing that with leaders today. It's not going to be open to cameras and the press. So we'll have to rely on reports when talking to those people who were in the room with him.
What's really fascinating about this is that they keep listing over and over again, like, 3 or 4 situations. How do you stop someone from murdering somebody, or domestic abuse or child abuse? Though child abuse is very often handled by social workers because it happens, after the fact. And it's quite possible that we could have police for this, but that's not all that they're doing. There's a tremendous amount of other things that they're doing that Ainsley Earhart doesn't mention, nor does Brian Kilmeade, because the rationale for the police doing that is a lot shakier. And in a moment, we're going to hear more about that. In the meantime, today's episode brought to you by Magic Spoon. As you know, for many people, breakfast cereal was one of the best parts about being a kid. You had the chance in the morning, you wake up with something nice and sugary and sweet. But then you grow up and you realize, like, oh, that's not good for you. That all that garbage sugar in there. Magic Spoon's a new cereal company that's discovered a way to recreate your favorite childhood cereals with 0 sugar, 12 grams of protein, and only 3 net grams of carbs in each serving. They offer 4 flavors based on the all-time classics: cocoa, fruity, frosted, and blueberry. And I had, let's see here. I have I tried to get my kids have been bugging me about this because they love it. They love it. And I'm happy to give it to them. I don't know how it's like monk fruit or something, extract or something like that. But it's the taste and the texture of that classic sugary cereal. But it tastes so incredible. You wouldn't know that it's healthy. And it's keto friendly, it's gluten free, it's grain free, it's soy free, it's low carb, and it's GMO free. I tried to do one of those like clever little ad things with Mila.
You want to say anything about Magic Spoon?
Yeah, it's so good. I love it so much.
That's fake sounding.
What?
It just sounds fake when you say it.
No, it's really good. Like, it's genuinely so good. Like, it tastes like Fruit Loops. And I was having it, and then I looked at it's really healthy compared to Fruit Loops. It's really good.
Okay.
There it is. I mean, it's not as smooth as one of those like NPR style produced ads, but my kids do love it. You can go to magicspoon.com/majority report, grab a variety pack, try it today. Use the promo code majority report at checkout, get free shipping. Magic Spoon is so confident they give you a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund you the money. No questions asked. Believe me, you're going to love it. magicspoon.com/majority report, code majority report for free shipping. Also, as you know, ExpressVPN protects your privacy and security online. But this you may not know. You can also use ExpressVPN to unlock movies and shows that are only available in other countries. Many of us stuck at home. You've gone through every possible iteration of a show that you wanted to binge on. You've run out of that stuff on Netflix, but you could use ExpressVPN to binge shows like Doctor Who on UK Netflix. You just fire up the ExpressVPN app, you change your location to the UK, refresh Netflix, and boom, that's it. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, lets you control where you want sites to think you're located. You can choose from almost 100 different countries. So just think about all the Netflix libraries you can go through. But it's not just Netflix. ExpressVPN works with any streaming service. ExpressVPN is ridiculously fast, so you can easily stream in HD. It's compatible with all your favorite devices. If you go to expressvpn.com/majority, you can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That's 3 months free. Support the show, watch what you want, protect yourself, all with ExpressVPN at expressvpn.com/majority. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll be talking to Alex Vitale. He's the professor of sociology at Brooklyn College, author of the 2017 The End of Policing. We'll be right back after this. We are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program Professor of Sociology at Brooklyn College, author of the 2017 End of Policing, Alex S. Vitale. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Sam. Happy to be here.
Okay, I just want to go through some of the things about your book, and then we'll obviously, I was telling Brendan, our producer, I couldn't hope for a better day to have you on, frankly, in terms of what we've seen in Minneapolis, in terms of what we've seen in New York City, in terms of what we've seen out of the U.S. Congress. But just give us the quick take on sort of the history of policing that you cover in your book, and certainly like how things have, I don't know if they've necessarily radically changed, but they feel like they've ratcheted up over the course of the last 40 years at an accelerating pace. And maybe you can touch on, some of the reasons for that.
Sure. Well, I mean, I don't want to go deep into history, but just this sense in which policing, which has been around for a little less than 200 years for the most part, is really rooted in systems of social control tied to economic exploitation ultimately. But more importantly, over the last 40 or 50 years, we've seen this intensification and expansion of the scale and scope of policing. And this is tied to the kinds of austerity politics and the neoliberal reorganization of the economy that's produced a whole set of new social problems like mass homelessness, mass untreated mental illness, failing schools, that have then been turned over to the police to manage. And so the book is really about alerting us to this fact and trying to lay out a roadmap for what we could do differently.
Where are we in terms of the number of police that we have historically?
So it's very hard to get a clear sense of this. The policing budgets and the numbers of police are not well reported. Just like we don't know how many people the police kill every year. Even that number we don't know. We have to make estimations. But we have seen a big expansion in the number of police, starting in part with the 1994 crime bill, which transferred millions of federal dollars into local policing.
And we should say that over the past, the past, I guess, 20, 30 years, we have seen crime drop precipitously, but it seems to be it does not correlate with anything that is being done, at least on a local level, on a policing end. I mean, I'm a big fan of the lead theory, but there's no clear indication that the addition of these police have anything to do with the diminishment of crime across the board.
The crime drop is an international phenomena, and policing in the United States is a hyper-local phenomena. So every police force has been trying to take credit for what's an international change. And these police forces are all using different methods. Some have gotten bigger, some have gotten smaller, some have used broken windows, some have used community policing, and they all say they're the reason. But that doesn't explain the crime drop in Canada, the crime drop in the UK, the crime drop in Northern Europe. So there are larger social forces at work here with this crime drop. And certainly the idea that we need to keep expanding police budgets at a time when we're at 25-year lows in terms of crime just doesn't compute.
Okay. And so basically the idea is that the police, your argument is the police are doing too many things. And there's a quality of this that it's the dynamic seems to me to be a little bit analogous to teaching and our schools on some level, where there's an expectation of teachers to address and overcome some societal problems that have nothing to really do with what their job is. And they're not being sent, they're not getting the expanded portfolio as much as they are just, I think, dealing with the problems that are outside, sort of on an ad hoc basis. But police have, like you say, have expanded their portfolio. give me a sense of like those areas where police are doing stuff that you think they should not be doing. Alex, are you there?
Sorry, you got me?
Yeah. I'm sorry. We lost you.
Sorry, not sure. I think my screen timed out. Sorry. So in New York City, we have over 5,000 personnel in New York City schools, more than all counselors, guidance counselors, social workers combined. So this is an example of how we've turned what is a problem of education over to the police to manage. On the mental health front, we deinstitutionalized the state mental health system, put people back in the community, but did not put any of the supports in place for them. And then when they have a crisis, we turn that over to the police to manage through hundreds of thousands, millions of mental health crisis calls. We've created a problem of mass homelessness and then turn that over to the police to manage rather than creating affordable housing or supportive housing. Even the decision to turn youth violence into a gang problem to be managed by gang units assumes that there's no other way to address this issue. And we do have other ways. We can look at cure violence models and other kinds of credible messenger strategies. We can look at targeted economic development programs. So we've really put police into more and more aspects of the everyday lives of the already most vulnerable communities in our society.
And I guess also another big part of it would I would presume is also the war on drugs. I mean, if we decriminalized all drugs and dealt with the issues surrounding drugs from with other means, it seems to me like a huge reason for the police to exist would go away.
Absolutely. Portugal has decriminalized all drugs, turned it over to public health authorities, and the outcomes have been extremely positive. The war on drugs was cooked up for political purposes. It was part of the Southern strategy of Republicans appealing to historically Democratic white Southern voters in the wake of the Civil Rights Movement. It was never about public health. It was never about public safety. It was about a toxic racist politics. And so we need to do a complete rethink. We put millions of people in prison for drugs in the United States, and anybody can get any kind of drugs they want. And we need a similar rethink on how we deal with things like sex work and homelessness and a whole range of things.
So is the idea to, when we talk about defunding the police, what we're basically saying is narrow their portfolio, use that funding to essentially really like provide, move that portfolio to other agencies, whether agencies that should be created or expanded, depending on what the social problem is.
That's right. We had a term a couple of decades ago called justice reinvestment that tried to lay out this idea. We also have had movements on the ground for decades making this argument. And more recently, we also hear the language of invest, divest, or defund police to invest in communities. But it's never just about cutting the police. It's always about also investing in these targeted evidence-based strategies to produce safety without all the collateral consequences that inherently come with policing.
So, I mean, I guess I was just struck. We just played a clip of Senator Tim Scott, and Fox News is really, they are very, very excited at this prospect of being able to talk about this crazy idea of defunding the police. And Tim Scott said something that I thought was really sort of fascinating in some way. He said it's the easiest way we have of dealing with things like unrest. And it just occurred to me, it's like, well, it's not necessarily the most effective, but I could see why it would be the easiest, because all you're basically doing is we have these problems. We want to sweep them under the rug. be as violent as you want when you're sweeping it under rug, and that's the easiest way for society to deal with it, as opposed to actually dealing with the problems themselves.
That's exactly right. Whenever we see a problem turned over to police to manage, what we should be looking for is the political failure that undergirds it. And I think we saw this play out in Buffalo the other day when the officer was suspended, the two officers for pushing that elderly gentleman over, and then the whole unit resigned from the unit. They saw that they were being put into an untenable situation by the political leadership in Buffalo, that the mayor used the police to solve his political problems for him. And then when they did something he didn't like, he threw them under the bus. So I'm actually, in a way, sympathetic with those officers, because that they should never have been put in that position. The mayor should have sat down with people to talk about the priorities for spending for Buffalo and understand this as a profoundly political question. De Blasio made exactly the same error as did Frey in Minneapolis.
I would imagine, and you might have a better sense of this, certainly than I, but you might have a very good sense of this, that there is a significant number of police officers who would be like, I would love to get this pay due and benefits, but be a counselor for kids at risk. Or help the homeless or something to that effect.
Absolutely. I gave a talk in Houston not long ago. I've been crisscrossing the country the last few years, and some police officers came, black and brown police officers, who said they went into policing hoping that they could try and help the community. And they said it's been a disaster. The culture of policing, the mission of policing just doesn't allow that. And I said, well, when you were thinking of being a police officer, if you'd had the choice between a job as a police officer or a job in a community center, coaching sports and mentoring kids for the same pay and benefits, which job would you have chosen? And of course, they all laughed. They were like, of course, we would have chosen a job working in a community center, but there were no such jobs. And I said, exactly. The challenge before us is to create those jobs.
Okay, so to make Ashley Ainsley and Fox and Friends comfortable, and everybody she represents, when we're talking about offloading, and I like the idea of disinvesting, because it's basically this is an infrastructure question in many respects, and we wouldn't go to the county tax assessor and say, hey, you're also in charge of health issues that you come across as you're assessing a property. It's just, you wouldn't do it. What do you perceive would remain within that portfolio, or is this are we talking about, completely abolishing the police force? You call 911, no one answers because unless it's a fire or something.
Yeah, no one's talking about flipping some magical switch that doesn't exist and tomorrow there are no police. It's not possible. It's not desirable. What we're talking about is trying to chip away at our over-reliance on policing. Now, there's also a part of this movement that I identify myself with that's trying to figure out in the long run how our society should look so that we don't need to rely on police so much, that we address fundamental problems of racial and economic inequality. But no one says they know exactly what that future looks like, exactly how we're going to get there, when we're going to get there. This is about doing the long, hard work of, producing a better political future. But we know that the presence of policing stands in the way of that future in important ways. And to the extent that we can diminish that, then we create space for this better possible future.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about just sequencing, because I do think that one of the biggest roadblocks, I feel like there's two roadblocks to reform. One is, I think there is a class interest in doing what Tim Scott says, which is take the easy route and, sweep this stuff under the rug, do it in a violent way. Because if we ever need, some other type of rug sweeping, it's good to know that we have this sort of like force of people who are willing to project violence upon others. That's one obstacle, it seems to me. And I don't know that you can really do much with that one. But the other obstacle, I think, is this sort of, fear and just wonder of, like, what do you do if someone's trying to murder someone or a, I think child abuse is a bad example because usually we do that after the fact, but like domestic abuse, we hear a lot, or, ongoing assault or something like this. How would you sequence it? Like, would you start, if you were advising, and I suspect that you have and will be, a municipality, and they say, like, we want a 5-year plan. What do we start with in terms of basically saying to our police department, we're taking away this percentage of your budget, and we're also commensurate with that, we're taking away 10% of your responsibilities. You no longer have a responsibility for dealing with homeless people, as at the very least, unless it's like a dire emergency type of situation. So we're going to take away, 10% of your time is spent with homelessness. We're going to hire, we're going to take 10% away. We're going to hire, we're going to give this money to the housing authority, and they're going to create a system to deal with homelessness, or they're going to build homes or something like that. Like, what would the sequencing be if you were advising somebody?
So, I've spent over 2 decades as a police scholar, and I've ridden around in the back of police cars and worked with police and police departments. And it's my view that in the United States, half of what they do is not only ineffective, it's possibly quite counterproductive. Now, that doesn't mean that we can just end all that immediately, right? The way this has to work is we have to build the community infrastructure to address these problems in different ways as we dial back the policing. So that means that we've got to have in place drug treatment programs, harm reduction capacity, before we just completely legalize drugs, because we might see problems of overdoses, et cetera. We need to put in place things like community-based anti-violence initiatives, the so-called Cure Violence or Credible Messenger program. These programs, when they're well run and operated, have shown tremendous success at reducing serious crimes, shootings, homicides. We have very good ideas about how to reduce domestic violence without involving the criminal justice system. I'll just recommend Lee Goodmark's brand new book, Decriminalizing Domestic Violence, if people want to look into that. We need to get police out of the sex work business. So that means eliminating the gang units and the vice units and the narcotics units, which are also where a tremendous amount of abuse and corruption are housed. And then we see what we're left with, and we look to see if we can come up with evidence-based strategies to do things differently. And what the end of that process looks like, in my mind, is an open question.
All right, so let's look at with that sort of laid out in terms of what we would do. Let's look at what has been done. This procedural justice, sort of like set of reforms that largely came out of the Obama administration. We sort of have a great experiment on their efficacy that I feel like just ended, and that is the Minneapolis Police Department.
They embraced the Obama task force on 21st century policing's advice. I mean, they did implicit bias training, police community meetings, body cameras, early warning systems for problem officers, and it just didn't make any real difference. Most of these things, there's no evidence to support them. And the few that have some evidence behind them shows that their impact is extremely small. There's a lot of cost involved, and they just don't get to the root of the problem. They paper over them. Implicit bias training assumes that the problems of racism and policing in America are about the the unconscious discretionary decision making of a few individual officers. And this is just ludicrous. We do have a problem of explicit racism in parts of American policing, but also the decision to turn the problems of poor non-white communities over to the police to solve reproduces racial inequality through mass incarceration and criminalization. So these reforms are not going to get us out of this mess, and that's why people have turned to this invest divest model, or defunding the police.
Let's talk about because there's to do what you're talking about, for the most part, seems to be almost like city by city by town by town type of situation. Give me a sense of, like, and I don't know if we know the details yet of what the Minneapolis City Council is talking about, but do you have a sense of, like, of what they're talking about, and if, how effective you think what they're talking about is going to be? And also we can talk about Bill de Blasio announcing, I guess it was yesterday, that they're going to cut $1 billion from the police force over the next 4 years. Give me a sense of the way that you would rank those, and then we'll talk about what's happening on a federal level.
Sure. So the first thing to keep in mind is that even before Minneapolis, right, there were dozens of cities who were doing this work to shift police funding. They were going to budget hearings and lobbying city council members city by city to do. There was an effort in Minneapolis by groups like Reclaim the Block and the Black Visions Collective. They were calling for a $45 million shift in the budget. Now,
and we should say that
TV,
45.
I was on TV.
I should just say that $45 million. $45 million, if I remember correctly, is approximately 25-30% of the budget.
It was something like that.
Okay.
Yes. And I was on the phone on television with Minneapolis City Council member Jeremiah Ellison this morning, and he said what they're proposing is a year-long process of doing community assessments to figure out what the public safety challenges are, and to work with communities to identify non-police alternatives to directly address those challenges. And I think that's exactly what needs to be done. And that needs to be done across the country. And that's really what so many people in this movement are specifically calling for. Now, de Blasio has not said what his numeric target is. That $1 billion figure comes from groups like the Policing and Social Justice Project that I support, and also some other officials have put that out as a possible number. We don't know what that number is going to be, but the fact that mayors in New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco are pledging to do this shows just how dramatically and how quickly the politics have changed, and we need to take full advantage of that.
Maybe I'm just extra jaded because, I've been locked in my house for 3 months. But when I hear they're going to take a year and make these assessments, I think immediately two things. I think, one, they're waiting till everything dies down, and this fades into whatever the next crisis will be, and two, that the Minneapolis Police Department, they're sitting around going like, so what are we going to F up to, tip the scales in the way that things are assessed here? I mean, what?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I agree. Something needs to be done concretely immediately, whether or not that is, some immediate shifting of personnel or some kind of legislative commitment about, the shifting of funds. I agree there needs to be done something to make this concrete, and so that elected officials can be held accountable for follow through. I just don't know exactly what that's going to look like. But it's also true that we shouldn't predetermine what this new model of producing public safety is going to look like. It needs to be done in consultation with communities.
Right, because it's also a function of, like, what are the problems that a specific community has? One community could have more problems with homelessness versus one problem having more of a problem with
opioids or youth violence or whatever.
Okay.
Exactly.
And so each police department, they have expanded their portfolio in a slightly different way, but they have all expanded it in a way that is inefficient and ineffective, and creates more problems than it solves. And I would imagine that this is also one of those situations where if you diversify the city's investment in dealing with these social problems, you're going to get a whole series of unexpected positive consequences. Right? Like we know.
That's the hope.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's the hope. Yes. I mean, but it seems to me like obvious, like you can't pour money into these sort of various areas where you have like social workers and you're actually empowering them and providing real resources without there being sort of, extraneous positive consequences from this. It seems, but maybe
part of it's ideological, right? Because when we empower policing as the solution to our problems, we're empowering the idea that there isn't the possibility of like doing something about inequality, about providing services for people who need it, so that we're undermining our own political objectives. Every time a big city mayor puts more money into policing, it's not just wasting the money, it's enabling an ideology that's fundamentally opposed to any kind of progressive vision for our society.
Well, absolutely. And I think part of it is that there is, like I say, that's one of the obstacles, I think, is that there's a class of people out there who are worried about the political power dynamics. If these social ills are dealt with in a different way. But let's look at what was released today by the Democrats. Not quite clear to me who, but it seems to be many co-sponsors on this. I'm looking at the Justice and Policing Act. Karen Bass as the chair, Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, and Jerry Nadler. So it's coming at least through the Justice Committee. And there seems to be 5 sort of like sections of this on a federal level. We've been talking about this as a local issue, but there is room for the feds here to do something. I want to go through this and give me your overall take on where you think this is effective and where it falls short.
So I haven't seen the latest version. I was sent a version a couple of days ago to look at, and I was not so taken with it. It seems to focus primarily on a set of procedural reforms, investigations, and some tightening of use of force and accountability processes. But it does nothing to actually dial back the scope of policing. It doesn't get rid of the 1033 program that transfers military hardware to the police. It doesn't end Operation Relentless Pursuit that is using $60 million to flood 7 cities with more federal law enforcement and pay for more local police. It doesn't repeal Sesta Fosta that criminalizes sex work. It doesn't put new resources into communities so that we can dial back school policing and mental health policing. So those are the kinds of reforms that this movement is calling for, not restrictions on chokeholds and more investigations from the Department of Justice.
All right, there's a couple places in here, and it's that stuck out to me, and I think your assessment of it is fairly accurate. Looking at the document that they put out today, there is, in terms of 1033, there is a section 365 in this that says Stop Militarizing Law Enforcement Act. The bill would limit the transfer of military-grade equipment to state and local law enforcement. That doesn't repeal 1033. It sounds like it just basically you're only going to get 1 tank, not 2 tanks this year, or something like that.
or you have to publicly report what you get.
But let me ask you this, and because I am also convinced, like even if we were, I think there's stuff in here that is necessary, but woefully insufficient. Even if we were to follow this prescription of, narrowing the portfolio of police work in this country and disinvesting and reinvesting in actually dealing with some of these social ills, we still need better accountability for the police actions, even in those areas where we may, as a society, ultimately land on it's an appropriate response, what we traditionally perceive as police work. Where are you on this qualified immunity reform? I know it's in front of the Supreme Court, or maybe they may have granted cert, or they may grant cert for some of these cases. But there's talk about modifying Section 1983 to enable individuals to recover damages when law enforcement officers violate their constitutional rights. I mean, that seems like a positive thing to me.
I mean, I have somewhat mixed feelings about it. I mean, it's true that we have a problem of impunity in policing, but I'm not sure that there's this kind of technocratic fix to it. There's already a lot of basis for penalizing problematic police behavior, but we just can't get juries, courts, police leaders, political leaders to follow through on it. So it requires the political will to do something about it, not as much as it does the creation of additional tools, which can be sort of ignored or not really followed through on. I also think that it has this ethos of like personal responsibility baked into it. That's why I think it's coming often from sort of libertarian corners, when really this is about a collective responsibility, that we have to look at the political decision to, unleash policing without consequences on society.
There's a couple other things that and it talks about providing that data that you talked about was missing in terms of how many people are killed by police, who are police targeting and this and that. This all seems to be data that would be helpful really only to get to the place that you're talking about today anyways. It's almost like, retroactively. I mean, it just shows you that there is a problem, but I think people are quite aware at this point that there is a problem. But what strikes me in this, because the real question is like, how could the feds in any way impact the decision of localities to do what you are proposing? And they provide the answer, but not necessarily for the same agenda, which is in multiple places, they talk about tying federal funding to some of the changes that they're asking for in terms of accountability, in terms of, like, here it is, ban no-knock warrants in drug cases. This is Section 362. You ban no-knock warrants in drug cases at the federal level, and then you condition law enforcement funding for state and local law enforcement agencies on prohibiting the use of no-knock warrants in drug cases. So in other words, they have recognized the tool that they have to impose reforms, but they could also do this on a budgetary thing, right? Where they could say, like, if your police department budget supersedes a certain amount or percentage of your overall budget, or if it's not balanced by these other things, you're going to lose all federal funding.
Yeah, I think that's really important because, you mentioned reporting requirements. There were reporting requirements before, but there was no leverage to get police to comply, so they just didn't. So yes, there needs to be that federal leverage, but there also needs to be new resources. And we need to cut the money we're already spending on things like Operation Relentless Pursuit. I think this no-knock prohibition is fantastic, but let's get rid of Operation Relentless Pursuit as well.
Anything else you think we should know at this point in terms of like moving forward? I mean, is it really just something that people have to take this moment, seize this moment, and push their municipalities and their states to begin to, like, explore these type of changes in the way that they configure their city services?
Yes, all of that, but also one of the exciting developments this week was a movement to get politicians to reject the campaign contributions they've received from police unions. And so in New York, over 15 elected officials went back through their campaign records, identified the funds they had received from police, and turned them over to bail funds and mutual aid projects, rejecting this idea that this is just another labor union trying to get a pension increase, that this is a toxic political force in our cities, and that to take their money is inconsistent with progressive politics.
Is there a warning too? Because I when you go after an institution like the police and all that's involved in that, both in terms of like some sympathies that they do have with the public has for them, and just the tremendous resources they have. Are there stuff that we should be watching out for in terms of like those 75 guys or so in Buffalo who resigned, or the idea of like the blue flu that we hear about, Are they just providing examples of where they're not necessary? Are there other things that we should be careful about going forward?
Well, I'm certainly concerned about the level of police violence being meted out on protesters across the country, and I think that this is connected. I'm also concerned about the way in which the police are not just a conservative institution themselves, but they're like a home for a whole set of conservative politics in many cities. And so what are those conservative forces going to do to try to maintain this approach to our problems? And we already see that it's taking the form of, gross misrepresentation of what we're talking about, like the clip you played before. So we have to keep doing the work of explaining what we mean, of mobilizing communities in concrete ways so that we build this from the ground up.
Alex Vitale, the book from 2017 is The End of Policing. We will put a link to that book at majority.fm. Of course, people can check out some of the op-eds that you've been writing over the past couple of weeks in and of itself, but really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
All right, folks. Going to head to the fun half. Just a reminder, it is your support that makes the show possible. We cannot do it without you. Weeks like this in particular, I thank the heavens, as it were. I don't know why the heavens, but why not? For our members, you guys carry us through times like this, just broadly speaking, but also, on YouTube, which is a source of revenue for us. Every show that we did last week got demonetized because we're talking about stuff that set off their algorithm. I'm not looking to litigate that question with YouTube, whatever. But it is, I do that only for the purpose of thanking our members. You can be one of those people at jointhemajorityreport.com. Sign up for a membership. You get the fun half as well as the free show, free of commercials. Occasionally we'll put it, but you can always check the podcast description and the YouTube description for links and find out what the deals we have to offer you. But if you're also one of those people who can't afford a membership but want part of access to the show, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Wait, and then we will eventually get to hooking you up. We will not keep anybody out for lack of resources, financial resources. Also, the merch is flying off the shelves, folks. people are going crazy over these mugs. The masks, we give 100% of our proceeds go to an immigration legal representation, the Pacific Northwest Immigration Services. I think I'm butchering their name. I don't know. I should really know that. So check it out. You can go to shop.majorityreportradio.com to it's the Northwest Immigrant Rights is project. You can go to shop.majorityreportradio.com to pick up your swag if you want. We got hoodies, we got hats, we got bandanas. I think we're going to make some more T-shirts too. People are eating those up. And the hoodies. My daughter said she liked the hoodie. And that was so I feel like I've made it. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. And don't forget AM Quickie. AM Quickie. You can sign up at amquickie.com. Do we have Jamie on the
she'll
line?
be right in. Yep.
Okay. Well, don't forget, check out TMBS tomorrow night, the Michael Brooks Show. You can sign up for it at patreon.com/TMBS, or you can subscribe at youtube.com, the Michael Brooks Show. Matt, you have any idea who's going to be on?
I'm not sure who's on this week. No, but
Michael, I keep telling him, tell me who's going to be on. He likes to keep
usually get
play close to the vest.
Every once in a while I get the show notes early, but not this week either. So, but it'll be good. And we got Noam Chomsky coming on later this month. So,
ooh, that's good. I don't know what happened. I've been trying to get him for a long time.
I don't know. You must have upset him.
I must have.
Because you look like the young him. Everybody always says.
I know. Maybe that's why. I don't know. Jamie, not there yet.
Hello.
Hello, Jamie. Don't forget, folks. Also, go over, subscribe to Nomi's show at the Nomiki Show at patreon.com/the Nomiki Show, and also at Nomiki Const on YouTube. She's doing multiple streams across the week. Check that out. Jamie, what's happening on the Antifada?
All right. So this week on the Antifada, I guess it was last week now, but we have a chill, non-riot related episode, although it actually is, right? Because all of these things are related. But Sean had a little boys chat with Andy Battle, returning guest, and David A. Banks. They did some political economy of deindustrialization, gentrification, uneven development, and, the class struggle. I learned a lot from it. It was a very good historically and materially grounded episode, shall we say. Also, today at 6:00, we are recording our 100th episode.
Wow.
So, yeah, I did not ever think that we would make it this far, but we did. I mean, I shouldn't speak too soon, but I'm pretty sure it's happening. I don't want to jinx it. But on this episode, we will be taking some questions. So if you have any last minute questions that you would like to ask us, you can email antifadamindset@gmail.com, and we will try to answer as many of them as possible.
Matt,
tonight,
what episode show is this for you?
I don't know how many. This is study hall, maybe like the 10th study hall I'm doing tonight at 10 p.m. at twitch.tv/literary hangover. I'll be playing Kingdom Come Deliverance, which is a medieval game set in Bohemia in the early 1400s. And I'll be listening to Georg Lukács, is a Marxist theorist who wrote the historical novel, and we'll be playing the section about Ivanhoe, and then maybe listening to a little bit of Ivanhoe by Walter Scott while playing Kingdom Come Deliverance.
When you do this, can you absorb what you're listening to, or have you just these are books that you've already read, and so you're just reminiscent? But are you able to both play the game? It's a one-person shooter, right?
Well, this one's a first-person sort of sword fight game.
Okay, so can you actually sword fight and listen to this and digest it simultaneously?
I found that certain games like NBA 2K are better for like passively digesting information, and the sword fight games, no, I don't retain really anything I listen to. But the people enjoy it, so. And then actually, to be honest, I re-listen to it sped up, so I absorb it that way. I listen to the audio again on my own Twitch. That's
all right,
true.
folks.
Give me 1 second to go ahead.
646-257-3920 is the number. 646-257-3920 is the number. We will see you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1 half. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance.
Ooh.
Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is the famous fun half. I want to start here. It's a little bit of a non sequitur, but there's a lot of talk about how Donald Trump is threatening our democracy, where you have the Attorney General of the United States ordering or not ordering, get her done, but not go do it, telling essentially quasi federales, deputized secret police force to go bust some heads of some peaceful protesters. People are very worried about that. Elliot Engel, however, who is running for re-election in the New York 16th district, he's worried about something that is similar but very, very different.
This is not a dictatorship. This is the democracy. We shouldn't have one person from high, even though she's a colleague of mine, think that she can anoint whoever is elected to Congress. That's not what democracy is all about. So I'm tried and true. I've been there. I've worked hard. I've done things for people. As I said to people, 2-year term, I asked for a renewal of my contract for another 2 years.
That's Elliot Engel actually taking this very moment to complain about the attacks on democracy by AOC endorsing his opponent. I mean, the gall that this guy has, this is the guy, remember, who showed up at a George Floyd protest and asked the local state senator, please get me on that stage. Please get me on that stage to speak. And the senator is like, I'm not sure I can, man. And he's like, I wouldn't care except for I've got this primary. And he's being primaried by Jamal Bowman. You can go and find, and maybe we'll put the links up to Jamal Bowman's interview that we did on Ring of Fire. We played it on the Majority Report. He's an excellent candidate. He is endorsed by all the right people. We need a progressive there. Engel is obviously he's slightly myopic. I mean, maybe literally myopic, but he's also seems like to me, Jamie, if you're taking this time to start with the phrase of like, this is anti-democratic. This is, we don't live in a dictatorship. And then the next sentence is, it's not fair for her to have endorsed my opponent. Are you serious? This guy's is this the first time he's ever had to campaign?
Might be the first time in a while. I mean, Sam, in a real democracy, people get their appointments for life and they never have to make a case for themselves after that. So, I think he's got a point.
In a real democracy, there are no endorsements from people. Everybody knows that. That never happens.
Should we watch this video? We just had the audio last time, but we have the video here.
Oh, yeah. Let's play this just to remind people. Here he is, caught on a hot mic. This is what true democracy looks like when you say,
Then I gotta go down the list, and it's just too many folks here.
If I didn't have a primary, I wouldn't care.
Say that again?
If I didn't have a primary, I wouldn't care.
Don't do that to me. We're not going to do this. We're not going to.
Yeah, don't do this to me. Come on. Don't make it about like you're an existential crisis for your political career, buddy.
Why does he think that's going to help in that moment?
It is. I mean, he's putting on there like that is politician speak for, I hope you don't come to me with some problem if you have a re-election problem. Or, I mean, it's creepy. I just find that guy to be super creepy. Jamal Bowman, make it happen, folks. We're what now? A couple of weeks away, I guess. I can't tell. I've mailed in my ballot, so I don't know. But I think it's June 23rd.
Oh boy.
Make it happen.
Yeah, no, that's textbook opportunism. I'd also like to find the video of him saying the same thing when all of the primary candidates were dropping out and consolidating their support behind Biden.
Yeah, I find it hard to believe that he was like, this is anti-democratic. All these people endorsing Joe Biden. Another race that I want people to really focus on, and if you're looking for, and look, this is hugely important. Chuck Schumer, and there's a piece in Politico today. Chuck Schumer, and I should say also that I think it was Dayan wrote about this at the Prospect some time ago. But Chuck Schumer was going around putting his thumb on the scale for every non-progressive he could in every race around the country in terms of the Senate, because we are now in a position where there is a lot of confidence that the Democrats are going to hold the House and could very well get the Senate. So there's two races I want you to really think about. Colorado, if you can help out Romanoff in any way, defeat Hickenlooper, go do it. Cory Gardner is in deep trouble, regardless of who he runs against. And Romanoff would be a massive better choice than Hickenlooper. I don't think he's going to be perfect, but he's going to be more commensurate with where Colorado should be. The other race I want to draw your attention to is in Kentucky. I don't know what the chance of a Democratic challenger beating Mitch McConnell is. In a vacuum, I would say probably not huge. This year could be a very different year. There's a lot of people motivated who are going to come out to vote against Donald Trump. We're seeing that already in the polling. And Mitch McConnell is not in that much favor with a lot of Republicans. There's a race in the primary between Charles Booker and Amy McGrath. I actually interviewed Charles Booker some time ago. We'll put up that interview. He's amazing. And he was just endorsed last night by Matt Jones, who many people thought was going to run at one point. And apparently he's a big sports announcer type figure in Kentucky. His politics to the right of Booker's, probably, somewhere around Amy McGrath's. But he's like, Booker is just a better candidate. He's a better candidate. He also happens to be much more progressive. And he's an exciting guy. This is, the Senate is right now in the event that there is an opportunity to pass some, New Deal-like legislation. I don't have huge hopes for Biden. I don't have huge hopes for Pelosi, or hopefully someone else will be the Speaker of the House. But the Senate is where a lot of this stuff will go to die, even if it's Chuck Schumer in the leadership, if he succeeds in getting all these conservative Democrats elected. You have an opportunity to make a difference. Booker in Kentucky, Romanoff in Colorado. If you're looking for where you can help, you want to expend some of your financial or just like personal resources, you want to make some calls, those are great places to do it. So check that out. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 575 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, this is Jeff in New Mexico.
Jeff in New Mexico. What's on your mind, Jeff?
Just calling to say that this is, this development with defunding the police. You can see that it's already made moves like a reform package for police possible. So we should keep going down this road of saying that we need to defund the police, because it will only aid and abet the reform of policing in this country. And that's pretty much all I had to say.
All right, appreciate the call.
Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, go ahead, Jamie.
I mean, defunding the police is a reform, right? It's a non-reformist reform made within an abolitionist framework that is qualitatively different from the kinds of reformist reforms that we've been seeing coming out of the Democrats.
I mean, I personally, in terms of language, I like the idea of disinvest from the police as opposed to defund. It means the same thing, but disinvest just sounds more like it is, because ultimately it really is about what is efficient and what is the proper way to address certain problems in society that have been really miscategorized as a job for the police. And I think it just sounds it's a lot less susceptible to scaring people. Defund the police allows people to go on and go like, what happens if there's like a violent crime? As opposed to disinvest means like we need to reorient what the police are doing.
Well, I mean, part of the work of police abolitionists is explaining and showing to people that the police actually do not do what they say that they do in terms of keeping people safe, right? Like domestic violence, for example. They're notoriously bad at dealing with domestic violence, and a lot of survivors of abuse end up being charged with the crime themselves. So just like having more conversations like that, I think is important. I get it. Abolition can seem scary, and it is the job of the abolitionist left to make it seem less so, educate the public. And the popularity of defunding or disinvesting right now, I think, is due largely to the work of abolitionists who ask for more than that.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that construct. Calling from a 409 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sam, this is Mr. Toro from Texas.
It's who? Mr. Toro?
Mr. Toro from Texas.
Mr. Toro from Texas. What can I do for you, Mr. Toro?
Two things real quick, Sam. I wanted to get you guys' thoughts on why this situation is different. After seeing the Tamir Rice tape and seeing the way this country reacted, it's surprising to me that we're at this point. So I want to know fundamentally what's changed. The second thing I got, Sam, is without getting into the conversation we don't want to talk about, I want to get your thoughts on these pundits, the people on the online left that are just critical of everything, mostly focusing on the left without any critique of the right. And, you know, the situation where nobody's progressive enough. You're not progressive enough. Jank's not progressive enough. Kyle's not progressive enough. I wanted to get your thoughts on some of the pitfalls of the online left, and I'll listen.
All right. Appreciate the phone call. First off, what I think is different right now on some level is that I think it's a combination of things. I think at one point you get just like a critical mass.
Snowball effect.
Yeah. And that it is a relatively new phenomena that we have videotape of all this stuff. Right. I mean, it is really only the past 4, 5, 6, 7 years where this stuff has become so ubiquitous, and a combination of video and social media makes it really, really hard for people to be ignorant or willfully ignorant. You know, there's different people have different sort of concepts of how much do we know about the sins of society and how much do we want to know about the sins of society and this and that. And without litigating that, this makes it very hard to deny it. So I think that's a critical mass. I think that the frustration that people feel in the context of coronavirus, I think added to it without a doubt. I think the idea that there are people who perceive this as a political expediency. You know, the Democrats really tried to be opportunistic with this. I don't think they were able to co-opt it, fortunately, but they tried. And I think it, ends up bringing some people along that weren't quite there because they perceive this as something also that is detrimental to Donald Trump. And I think it is. Certainly what happened in that square in Washington, D.C. was very problematic for him. So I think all these things are conspiring. And I think also that the idea that there are so many, that Minneapolis was the perfect place to make the argument that the reforms that were proposed before don't work, right? The experiment is over. And 5 years is a long enough time where you would expect it to stick. And I think there's enough ideas out there to do this. And it's these are fairly obvious things. They dovetail with things like decriminalized drugs. There are all these sort of parallel, I think, political pushes. And I think that's why. But I'm also not 100% convinced that it's game, set, match. But it definitely...
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think this could be the start of something, but we really, really need to keep it up. I'm already seeing people self-appointed leaders from the NGO sector or from, Democratic politics trying to co-opt this movement to varying degrees of success. And we can't let that happen. We need to be talking to each other. We need to be having general assemblies, talking about strategy, talking about demands. All the different groups and individuals participating in these protests need to get to know each other and figure out what we do next. Also, people are out of work right now, so they've got nothing else to do.
Yep.
they're going to go out in the streets because they're pissed off. Even people who've been staying in their houses this whole time, obeying the quarantine, while simultaneously local governments and federal governments have been imposing austerity on them, giving them a $1,200 check and telling them, good luck. Like, people are mad and they've got time on their hands.
Well, that austerity too is, I think, could end up providing a little bit of impetus for the cities and the states because they don't have the resources. They have yet to get the federal funding and bailout that they need. And so that may also help push budget cuts to the police, frankly. But we'll see how that plays out. In terms of the second part of what the caller said, I don't, different strokes for different folks in terms of like people don't, people can make the argument about how left or they want. I think there's a lot of people out there who conflate being an establishment contrarian with necessarily leftist politics. Because for me, I'm interested in outcomes and the quickest way to changes in society that I seek. I don't, if it involves leveraging establishment people, fine. If it doesn't, fine. I don't care. I'm agnostic as to those questions. I see some structural problems, obviously, with certain individuals and certain types of individuals, I should say, and class structures. But I'm not, that the idea that there are people to the left of me is more than fine. It makes my goals that much more attainable, frankly.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, listen, when 15 years ago, in terms of like mass communication, there just wasn't people who were to the left of me. There just wasn't like mechanisms. They didn't exist. And
now you have 100,000 internet users that are all to the left of Noam Chomsky in their minds.
Yeah. And I don't know if they are or they're not, but the point is that like that discourse is very, very helpful. With the stuff where it's like they're just contrarians who want to burn everything down because it's good for their brand. Yeah, I think that's problematic. And I don't think that, I think there are times where that's worse than other times. I feel like those people are just not being, taken very seriously by very many people. Maybe enough to support them in their various outlets, but in terms of like the political influence, I think that it's just not there. I mean, we were told, right, that the election of Donald Trump by a lot of these people was going to bring about a Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, I think, some of these people said. And I think they were wrong. I mean, I don't think they were wrong. They were wrong. That's just the reality. I think that the left is going to grow with Joe Biden presidency because he is not going to be he is not going to provide the sufficient change that we need, but he is going to provide like the sense that things could change. And I think we're going to see the pressure. Now there's like just the dynamics are very different than even in 2018. Like just with think about like the Congress people that we talk about on the show on a daily basis. Half of them weren't in, 3/4 of them were not in office, in 2017. The Congressional Progressive Caucus had much more anemic leadership. I think it's just like, to a certain extent, I think it's just time and, and whatnot in terms of the new generations, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I would add one point about the media critique that this person brought up. I think there's a difference between making valid critiques of the things that somebody is saying in their media project and the funding structures and business models of that project. That's different than like just being a hater or just doing purity politics or whatever. And I feel like that is something people use a lot of the time to deflect legitimate criticism rather than engage with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I would be lying if I said I follow a lot of this because it's enough just to do this show. But, phone lines are open. Happy to address any critique.
Yeah, if those shows were so good, we wouldn't have to make this one.
True.
Fair enough. It is really, I find it obnoxious to not address those critiques when they come up. I just find that obnoxious. I mean, I'll go, on to just about anybody's show, maybe not Gavin's, unless he pays me a lot of money. If he had said for free in the beginning, I might have gone on, but once I saw like $5,000, I was like, wait a second, I'll do it for $250.
What about would you do Tim Pool again?
Would I go on with Tim Pool again? Yeah, I would. Sure. Why not? I mean, I don't know if I would commit to as much time, but yeah, I'm ready for a round two. Calling from a 516 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is this me?
I think it's you. Who are you?
Well, hello, Sam. This is Doyle from Long Island.
Doyle from Long Island. What's on your mind, Doyle?
So I am from Nassau County, the failed experiment of redlining and other tactics used by the former generation. For example, we had the Meadowbrook Parkway along the South Shore. There's Freeport on one side, which is 20% white, and on the other side is 80%. And last week, there was a peaceful protest going down the Meadowbrook into Merrick Road, which extends all the way from Suffolk to Queens. And it was coming in from Freeport, which was mostly of the, the non-white minority community. And as they approached Merrick, they were met with just awful people telling them to go back.
So a lot of black people tried to go to the protest, and a bunch of white people said, you can't come here and protest.
Essentially, yeah. Freeport's made up of a lot of Latin communities too.
Okay.
But yeah, the sentiment was there. They told the police to check their licenses.
Jesus.
Yeah, I can send you the videos if you guys would like. And a lot of people on the Boomer Facebook was posting fake signs of Black Lives Matter, like, hey, we're gonna come to the neighborhood, just like these old tropes of and I'm sure you're privy to it, especially with Long Island, of the redlining. I mean, Levittown's probably the best example of everything.
Sean Hannity's. This is where Sean Hannity grew up.
Yeah. Actually, Matt Speakle, a few towns over, is home to Pete King, which I'm sure you're familiar with too.
Of course.
And Pete King represents just the stereotypical Long Island male of Nassau County is infamous when it comes to the Republican machine. If you want to work for the town of Hempstead, which is what I'm incorporated in, you have to be a Republican if you want to get anywhere up the ladder. And so it was just terrible. But there is good news though, because after those videos were circulated around on Tuesday along Sunrise Highway, which is a major road along Long Island, people came out. It was about anywhere I've heard from 4,000 to 10,000 strong. It was a amalgamy of people, white and black, Latin. It was really good to see. And, despite of all the awful things that I mentioned, it gave me hope in the community. We went through multiple streets and people were coming out, and, I was afraid of the opposition of being yelled at again. But, it was just comforting to see. It gave me a little more hope that, Trump will try to bring up the silent majority and all that, but I think the true silent majority are the people who are fed up with this. And one more point I just wanted to make, growing up, I always heard especially when it came to the volunteer firemen around here. Like, oh yeah, we're giving them too much tax money, so they can just, refurbish their firehouses and, so they can hang out there when they're just, going to respond to, saving a cat in a tree. But, if anybody's having some difficulty discussing with their parents regarding this, perhaps, framing it like that would serve as a better argument. If that's all they really care about, which it seems like, a lot of the parents on Long Island, that's all they really care about.
Yeah.
But that's all. I just wanted to thank you. Thank everybody on the show. Thanks for the free education every day. And love you guys.
Thanks, Doyle. Appreciate the call. I mean, I actually think that you can just say, like, when you're talking about, some of the olds, count myself in that category, saying like, cops are doing a lot of stuff that they don't want to be doing and they shouldn't be doing and they're not trained to do. And so let's move some of the funding. If they're doing 10% in this silo, they shouldn't be doing that. And let's move that over to the housing authority. If they're dealing with drug abuse, let's move that over to the health department. And that to me just sounds like a very sort of dry, non-ideological, although it is ideological on some level, response. I mean, it's very, frankly, there is an analogy on some level to what we ask of teachers. Although I have a different perception of teachers in general than cops, but the dynamic is the same. We ask teachers to deal with social problems that implicate the outcomes of what they do, and it doesn't make any sense, and they can't overcome it. With police, they can't overcome this, and ends up being like they're a violent response. I mean, that is a fairly human response to not being able, to being out sort of in over your head on some level in some of these areas. You respond violently because it's the only way that you know how. I'm being a little bit generous, but I'm also talking about how you talk to your parents.
Yeah. I mean, the inconvenient truth is that it is more expensive to deal with the root causes of crime in society than to just throw money at a police department. But maybe we don't want to lead with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably true. And, it's like what Tim Scott said. It's easier. Rather than deal with poverty or homelessness or opioid abuse or just the underlying issues that people are protesting about, let's just get some really strong guys, some of whom may be roided up, and, have them get rid of the problem.
Yeah.
Jonathan Armstead. Sam, did you hear the news that Sean Hannity got divorced from his wife of 26 years? I did not hear that. I feel so sad for the children. It's a real crisis. Absentee fathers in the white community. I'm so glad that you're there for your kids now, though, Sam. You're a real credit to your people. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. 10 lawn gnomes. Do you think the increased militarization of D.C. will lead to more calls for statehood? If the Democrats take the Senate, and on day one, they don't make D.C. a state, attempt to at least. God, idiots. Well, idiot is probably not the right word. They will be blocked ideologically from doing it. CBD Jazz cigarettes. Just became a member through the app. Shofar, please. You got it. It's been a while since I. Please make the Vitale interview available ASAP. I need talking points for discussing defunding the police with fellow rural Utahns. It'll be podcasts in, I don't know, 3 hours less.
My cousin, actually, one of my cousins asked me for some defund the police background, but he's prefaced it with, I don't want to get political. And I think like that's where a lot of people are. Like they recognize a huge problem here. And I think Vitale, like I think his approach is great.
Yes, I think honestly, this is why I keep talking about it as a excuse me. This is why I keep talking about it in the context of like efficiency and in the idea of like we have put too much burden on police to deal with societal ills that they are not equipped to deal with. So, have other municipal departments that are better suited and experts in these areas deal with issues like people are not housed, like opioid addiction, and then, decriminalize, which I think a lot of people there's a lot more of an appetite for that than there was, let's say 10, 15 years ago. Yeah. Decriminalize as much as you can. That doesn't involve like people getting hurt, and make it about just efficiency. And that's why, like I say, disinvest sounds like it's an infrastructure project. Like we're not going to invest in fossil fuels. We're going to invest in renewable energy. And in this instance, it's like we're not going to invest in a mechanism to deal with problems that we deal with in cities and towns across the country that has shown that it's not really built for that. And that is a very sort of non-ideological way to present this to people, where it's just like, this is common sense. We wouldn't like say to the Department of Public Works, hey, you guys are in charge of dealing with homelessness now. That would not work out very well if their building inspectors went around and were like in charge of homeless people. But we give it to the cops because violence is not necessarily the most efficient and healthy response to everything, but violence can be a response to everything. I mean, it really can be. It is the one thing, like, you got a problem, beat the hell out of that person, problem goes away. Well, it creates a ripple effect of other problems, but the immediate one goes away. So
it's also a question of like, what kind of society do you want to live in? Maybe this will work better on liberals than on conservatives, but you can appeal to someone's basic humanity by saying, even if violence did solve these problems, which it absolutely does not, do you want to live in a world where people are beaten by the violent arm of the state and treated like they're less than human because they're working class, because they're poor, because they're non-white? Or do you want to live in a world where everyone has a chance at living a decent life? This is part of that.
Here is Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey saying that he would not, and see, again, listen to the question and then his response. So it's a little bit like there's a little bit of room, and I do think that there is value. Again, like I said, like I think, James made the point that these arguments are made in the abolition framework, but I don't necessarily think that you need to, it's another one of those situations like where the highway is headed in a certain direction, and a lot of the off-ramps are very helpful along the way. There are some, ideologies and some ideas where you head down that direction and every single off-ramp is a hellscape until you get to, some end goal. I happen to think that a lot of the off-ramps on the way to full abolition is very helpful. And you don't necessarily have to advertise it as full abolition because listen to this exchange.
Jacob Frey, we have a yes or no question for you. Yes or no, will you commit to defunding Minneapolis Police Department?
Abolition of it?
What did I say? We don't want no more police. Is that clear? We don't want people with guns toting around in our community, shooting us down. You have an answer? It is a yes or a no. It is a yes or a no. All right, be quiet, y'all. Be quiet, because it's important that we actually hear this. It's important that we hear this, because if y'all don't know, he's up for re-election next year. If y'all don't know, he's up for re-election next year. And if he says no, guess what the we gonna do next year? Louder one more time. Loud and clear. Louder. Yeah. I do not support full abolition. All right. Hey! You're wasting our time. Get out of here. Get out. Go home, Jacob. Go home. 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 Go home, Jacob. Go home.
That's people power.
Tough day to be the mayor.
This makes me miss The Office when we would do this to each other when someone had a bad opinion.
Go home, Michael. Go home.
I mean, I think look, I have to say, I look at that and there is, I am comfortable with everybody's role in that scenario. I don't think that, I don't think the idea of full abolition of the police is something that you sign off to today. I think, defunding is one thing. Full abolition is another.
It's interesting that he pushed it from, the question was about defunding and he rephrased it in terms of abolition.
Right.
And that's actually why I preferred, we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago. Like, I think defunding is the way to Trojan horse abolitionist framework into people, which is why I actually prefer it to the disinvestment.
I think he said, I mean, he could have said, I'm for defunding and been okay at that point. And then later said, by defunding, I mean, like, I want to cut the budget.
Right.
I want to,
That's true.
But
so he was actually forthright about it, actually.
To his credit. I mean, honestly, to his credit, he said, I can't support full abolition of the police department, but defunding is,
at least he didn't pretend.
Some wiggle room, and good for him for being explicit, and good for the protesters for pushing this guy as far as you can be pushed. I mean, I think, like I say, that was a tough walk he had, but I'm sure he'll be fine.
More mayors should be in that position. I think that's a sign of a healthy democracy right there.
Definitely. Like, you got to give the guy credit for being there, for giving a straight answer. Like, every other politician that you see in a major city, I think, would have said, and I don't want to, I'm not heaping praise on this guy, but I'm just saying in that moment, would have said, I am for defunding the police department. And they would have walked out of the crowd to massive cheers. And then they would have issued a release saying, like, the mayor stands by his words. He is looking at a 0.75% reduction in police budget for 2022, fiscal 2022, coupled with, of course, an increase in blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's the way they would have done that. But that's why I think everybody in that situation functioned exactly like they should. We should be pushing our politicians. We should be pushing, and the bar should be one that they can barely actually meet at any point.
Yeah. I mean, not to get too broad with it, but like, total abolition of the police is not something that an elected official who is part of the state really can sign on to, right? Because this is connected to all other issues. I don't know any abolitionists who also want to leave capitalism standing, it really requires not just a rethinking of how we deal with harm in our society, but a total rethinking of how society is ordered. And that's what's good about it. It points in all these other directions. But like, that's expecting a lot from an elected official. And like, they can't take us all the way there. The bourgeois state cannot abolish itself, like, they cannot abolish the institution that upholds private property and the bourgeois state. I mean, we've got some socialist elected officials like here in New York, but not that many of them. And it is like a fundamental conflict at the end of the day.
And I think the reality is that if you take these steps that Vitale was talking about in the, near to midterm, decouple responsibility for dealing with people who are unhoused, decouple responsibility for policing drug use, decouple responsibility for policing sex work, and more off the top of my head, I can't remember, but, and then you see where you're at. And then you see what is working, what is not working. I mean, this is,
and the playing field will be much better at that point too.
Without a doubt. And you'll have examples of stuff like, hey, this works a lot. This doesn't work. Maybe we need to make this slight change. And you're going to have more ability to actually affect that change, because as you're going, you're also slowing the power. I mean, decreasing the power of that institution because you're decreasing their resources.
Yeah.
And you're decreasing the reliance that is perceived, that people have a perception of how much we rely on these people.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, a long-term goal like abolition, a long-term goal like socialism, elected officials can get us part of the way there. They can play a role, maybe, but it's up to the people to take it the rest of the way. That's not something they can do for us.
Let's revisit let's visit on our chief law enforcement officer in the country, Bill Barr, who reportedly ordered the clearing of the, I don't even remember what the square is, Lafayette Square in Washington, D.C., so that the president could take a walk and take a picture of himself holding up a Bible in front of a church. And listen to this guy parse and really try. And I, for the life of me, I don't know who he thinks his audience is here, except for maybe Margaret Brennan, who is sitting across from him. I don't know who he thinks he's kidding with this, but Bill Barr will Bill Barr.
Law enforcement has been going through the same process.
Do you think there should be some tweaking of the rules, reduced immunity to go after some of the bad cops?
I don't think you need to reduce immunity to go after the bad cops, because that would result certainly in police pulling back. It's, policing is the toughest job in the country, and I frankly think that we have generally the vast overwhelming majority of police are good people. They're civic-minded people who believe in serving the public. They do so bravely. They do so righteously.
But the bad cops?
I think that there are instances of bad cops, and I think we have to be careful about automatically assuming that the actions of an individual necessarily mean that their organization is rotten. All organizations have people who engage in misconduct, and you sometimes have to be careful as to when you ascribe that to the whole organization and when it really is some errant member who isn't following the rules.
But doesn't the opening the pattern of practice investigation to a place like Minneapolis, where there are questions about the broader issues with policing, it wasn't just the one officer, wouldn't that answer that question?
Well, that's exactly the reaction that I think has been a problem in the past, which is just reacting to this incident by immediately putting the department under investigation doesn't necessarily result in improving the situation.
This
but I
guy,
would say,
what's brilliant about the way this guy answers. I mean, he's such a lawyer. By saying not necessarily, when he keeps adding not necessarily, it is basically a way of saying it is the case, yes, that there is a problem there, but it's not necessarily a problem there. So we can discount the fact that there's a problem there because it's not necessarily the case. It is the case that the house is on fire, but it's not necessarily on fire because it could possibly not be on fire. Now, it happens to be on fire, but I'm going to lean on the fact that it's not inherent in the building to be on fire. And, one of the things that Bill Barr says here is also, it seems to me, to be a good talking point that if you're talking to people who you think are not inclined to hear this message, which is you can say there are good people who work on the police force. And you can say it's the toughest job there is. In fact, the reason why we have these problems is because it's too tough of a job. We've put too much on cops, and good people are turning bad because of it. And what we should be doing is taking stuff that cops are not trained for and putting it in other areas of the city. And that's the way that you basically get within their talking point, their frame of reference, accept their premises, and then leverage that to move towards the way that you want, police to be actually constructed. Let's continue to hear him. Is there any more on this, or should we go to the other one?
Yes, there's more. There's like a minute left.
Okay.
Necessarily result in improving the situation. But I would say that in the first instance, the governor has announced an investigation of the police department. The Governor Walz, a Democratic governor, is investigating the police department. The Attorney General of Minnesota is looking into the police department. We stand ready to act if we think it's necessary, but I don't think necessarily starting a pattern or practice investigation at this stage is warranted. Another thing is we have to look at some of the evidence. I mean, people, the fact is that the criminal justice system at both the state and the federal level moved instantaneously on this, and we moved quickly with our investigation. But we still have to look into what kind of use of force policies are used in that department, what the training has been, and things like that. That's not something we can do overnight.
Here is Bill Barr basically dodging his role in ordering the attack on peaceful protesters in Lafayette Square. And remember, that reporter from MSNBC, Hakey or whatever his name is, I'm going to quote him because it just rings in my ear when he was giving this report as they were like, these federales, these like no-name federal police force was attacking the protesters. He said this wasn't 98% peaceful. This wasn't 99% peaceful. It was 100% peaceful. And the police just started attacking. And here is Bill Barr saying, well, I didn't really tell them to do it. I just sort of like suggested, and that's what happened.
Thrown. I saw them thrown.
And you believe that what the Park Police did using tear gas and projectiles was appropriate?
Here's what the media is missing. This was not an operation to respond to that particular crowd. It was an operation to move the perimeter one block.
And the methods they used, you think, were appropriate? Is that
when
what
they
you're
met
saying?
resistance, yes. They announced 3 times. They didn't move. By the way, there was no tear gas used. The tear gas was used Sunday when they had to clear 8th Street to allow the fire department to come in to save St. John's Church. That's when tear gas was used.
There were chemical irritants, the Park
No, there were not
Police
chemical
said.
irritants. Pepper spray is not a chemical irritant.
I
It's not
don't
chemical.
think so.
Pepper spray, you're saying, is
Pepper
what was
balls.
used.
Pepper balls.
Right. And you believe that was appropriate. What I want to show you.
Pepper ball. Oh, wait, no, do we not have him saying the part where it's like
a 5-minute clip of him going back and forth.
let's just get
I
him
can
saying-
pull it up.
I want to do the part where he says like, I didn't say go in there and do it. I just said get it done. Let me read that quote. I'll read that quote because that is just classic Bill Barr. And I got news for you, folks. It wasn't just pepper balls. There were canisters. There were canisters being launched. Everybody watched the video.
He makes it sound like a seasoning you put on a sandwich. Like all of these things are incredibly painful and potentially lethal weapons.
Of course, people lose their eyes. People get, are bleeding. He says, I'm not involved in giving tactical commands like that. First of all, I'd like to know why the Attorney General is involved in giving any commands to a police force. It's not his job to be like, oh, the president's I'm an advance man. I'm going to walk out. Oh, wait, we need to expand the perimeter. That's not the job of the attorney general, to expand the perimeter of the White House security. I'm not involved in giving tactical commands like that, he said. I was frustrated. And I was also worried that as the crowd grew, it was going to be harder and harder to do. This is talking about the really important walk to hold the Bible in front of the, let's just keep in mind here. It's one thing to say we needed to expand the perimeter of the White House because we were afraid that there was an imminent attack going to happen on the White House, and we needed to save the lives of thousands upon thousands of people because we were afraid there was going to be some type of massive explosion that could have happened, and we needed to get everybody out of there quickly. No, let's be clear. He needed to expand the perimeter around the White House so that the president could walk over, take a Bible from his daughter's $1,400 handbag, a Bible that even when he was asked, is that your Bible? No, it's a Bible. Hold it upside down, shake it as if it's like some type of amulet, and stand in front of a church in which he probably has never been on the inside in the first place. And basically arrest the priests or the ministers there and kick them out of there so that he could go there and abuse the church for the sake of his photo op. That's why this had to happen.
Yeah, those priests were no angels. No.
No, they were no angels. No, they were completely alive. I'm not involved in giving tactical commands like that, he said. I was frustrated. And I was also worried that as the crowd grew, it was going to be harder and harder to do. So my attitude was get it done. But I didn't say, go do it. I wonder what he said that convinced this massive army of ununiformed or secret Department of Justice police to go and attack these people. I wonder what he said as opposed to go do it.
Yeah.
Do you think it was let's come up with a couple ideas. Like, it would be nice if that was done.
I was going to say, won't somebody rid me of this meddlesome protest?
Yes. Anybody want a bonus this month? Hello?
But you work for Bill Barr.
I mean, unbelievable what this guy thinks he can get away with. They should have impeached this effer along with Donald Trump. They should do it now. I want to know the exact words he said. My attitude. I mean, we should all be so lucky that we can just simply, just your attitude alone can get that type of response. Like, can you imagine what would have happened if he had said, go do it? They would have probably affixed bayonets to the front of their batons and just stabbed everybody.
Yeah, Jesus. It's crazy that the military has had to stand up to the White House on this stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Calling from a 651 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yo. My name is Chris Lapaco, and I'm calling from God's country, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Chris Lapaco, I can imagine you've had a very busy couple of days.
It has been absolutely crazy. Everyone's seen the stuff online, but I mean, National Guard and the police brutality and the mass protests have been overwhelming, and it's just been super stressful, but it's promising, I guess. I went out to protest multiple times. My fiance, she went out after a curfew because she's a badass, so I want to give her a shout out. She's listening now too. She's a regular listener of Majority Report.
Well, that's great.
It
sounds like the perfect couple. I like it.
I think so. We have all done our part in radicalizing her, and Jamie, she's done a really good job too, exposing her to different ideas. And then I want to say, as far as police abolition goes, when I first heard about this, and I've had really extreme leftist friends for a long time, and I always kind of wrote off the police abolition thing. But I think what you guys are talking about in terms of let's limit some of the things that they are responsible for. I think people will get on board with that. And maybe for me, the way I'm going to phrase it from now on and be like, when someone calls 911, one of the questions should be asked, does anybody need to be shot to death right now? Like, that's pretty much what it is. Because when you're calling 911 and you're sending a cop out there, the reason you're sending a cop out there is because they have a gun, essentially, to solve these problems. And I think a lot of people just take for granted, like, yeah, I want someone with a gun there. Like, do you want someone who's going to be shot to death over like parking in a handicapped spot, or, like standing around in a neighborhood where you don't think they look familiar? Like, send someone out there who lives there and see if they know them or whatever. So I think like definitely, instead of saying abolish police, I like that you're going on the offensive when you do that and allowing yourself maybe an opportunity to explain it. But I think that has to come like at the front of the conversation, is like, we're making their jobs easier. If you support police, right, make their jobs easier. Let's take some of the stress off them so they aren't put in these bad positions. So I just want to like give a shout out to Minneapolis in general. And I'm proud of my city, and I'm proud of, all the other cities that are making changes happen, and good for us. Let's keep going.
Yeah. Good job, Chris. Appreciate you calling in, man.
Hell yeah. I also think you
got
to
to tailor
tailor
responsibility. All right.
Bye-bye.
You got to tailor the message to who you're talking to, right?
Yes.
If you're talking to like some middle-class white person who still likes Bill Clinton, or, a member of the bourgeoisie, you're going to temper the abolitionist language a little bit. However, if you are talking to somebody whose life has already been impacted by the carceral state, you'd be surprised how open to abolitionist ideas these people are. Just like anecdotally hearing from my friend who's part of No New Jails, who does the Rikers table, the table on the way to Rikers Island. They have a table set up at the bus stop, and they just talk to people. They got coffee and donuts. A lot of folks on their way to Rikers Island are already on board with abolition. They just don't necessarily have the language to talk about it.
Calling from a 336 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, this is Andrew from North Carolina.
Andrew from North Carolina. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I'm calling because I think it was Saturday. They had the funeral or service for George Floyd in Rayford, North Carolina. And so they put it on TV, local TV. So I watched it. And that service, it's like a traditional, like, Southern Baptist service, if you can imagine it. Being in New York, I'm sure you can definitely imagine that. But they had, different guests come by there. And, for me, a lot of those guests that came, their message kind of rang hollow. Like, they had William Hudson, who was like the state rep of that area, and he was a Republican. And I'm like, knowing North Carolina's
right
with Republicans, I'm not really a fan of that. G.K. Butterfield also talked there, and he talked about how Congress was going to, I think they were going to have something about it, like either a conference or something like that about it. I forget what it was. But, again, it still rings hollow to me because it's like Congress barely does anything anyway, really. And he's the most progressive Democrat in, the House of Representatives. So I wasn't a fan. And the Rayford police chief also talked there. And I have a quote from him, and it says, "We as law enforcement officers don't have the authority to bully, push people around, and kill them because we have on a badge and a gun." Which, I mean, it's a nice sentiment, but this was something that it shouldn't have taken, I guess a local person to die for him to say that,
right?
Or to have, some sort of policies that go towards that, him as a police chief. So it didn't make me say, oh yeah, I get it. It made me go like, well, why didn't you, do that before? Well, how come there's no more police chiefs on your side, supposedly? So, and yeah.
Well, the only thing I would tell you is that I think your cynicism and jadedness is warranted, but I would channel that that response into holding them to their words at those moments, right? I mean,
Oh yeah,
I think it is the case that yes, there's a lot of this stuff that is just very convenient, as Elliot Engel said, like, if it wasn't for my primary, I wouldn't be here. But the fact is that while they still are in that mindset where they understand the political salience of this moment, you gotta, this is when you lock people in as much as you can. And there's definitely, all of these things are always like, a step forward, maybe a half a step back, if we're lucky. But you got to bank that half a step as quickly as possible, so that the next time there's another step and another step.
And I definitely wasn't saying that to say, oh, look at these politicians lying to us. I mean, I obviously don't need to bring this up for us to know that, but it is something that, we do have to put everything in context. So like when we hear someone, these politicians speaking, like, we do have to also look at their history, as, you and many other progressive online, people definitely do. If you put their stuff into perspective, that's something that we always have to keep in the back of our mind when we hear them talk. So
appreciate the call.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. Look at this. I mean, let's look at this clip from Buffalo. So everybody has seen the video, I would imagine. And I've been talking to people, actually, people who are sort of less political than more so than normal, I guess, in normal times, because people are less busy and they're, in some instances, and they're willing to talk, and they're, obviously more in tune to this stuff. And the video of those Buffalo police officers pushing that 72-year-old man to the ground and then being sort of ushered by the police leadership, when, the cop who pushed him over was like, wait, what? Oh my God, what did I do? And his leadership basically tells him, like, keep walking. In fact, get those two guys up ahead, as a way, I guess, presumably, of creating like some sense of chaos, and like, this is, some a purpose of mission. And there's actually, most people have seen the video as you're looking, as the police are coming towards us, basically, and the 72-year-old man walks up. Most people have seen it from the angle to the right of that police line. But the angle from the left of that police line is almost just as disturbing, because you can hear his head hit the ground. And police all the way at the other end of that line stop and look over, and you could feel that they realized something was wrong. But they are trained to ignore the fact that they have just possibly killed somebody. And I think he's still in intensive care. So you would imagine that the response by the other police officers, after these first police officers are charged with felony assault, would be like, we've got to really reform ourselves. But no, like 75 or 74 police officers supposedly resigned from that internal squad, I guess. And this is the response they gave these cops when they came out of the courthouse.
This happened just in the last hour. Two police officers were charged with felony assault during a protest in Buffalo, and they were applauded by their colleagues as they left the courthouse. Officers Robert McCabe and Aaron Torgalski pleaded not guilty. They were released without bail. And we've been showing you the...
There you go. They're, applauding these guys. I mean, they're applauding them. like, I can understand maybe they show up and they're just like standing quietly because we, our buddy is a total F up and, but it's a somber moment, but we want to show some solidarity. But they're applauding this. And I think that, is the best argument. When you hear Bill Barr go up there and say it's a couple of bad apples and you can't just, send in the Justice Department when there's a problem. You've got to ignore the fact that you see scenes like that. And then you've got to ignore the fact that that's happening in Buffalo, and that's happening in New York City, and it's happening in Brooklyn and Queens and the Bronx, and it's happening in Florida and LA and in Cleveland and in Arizona and Colorado and in Seattle. And you've got to ignore that it's happening all across the country. You've got to ignore all of those things to think that there isn't a systemic and structural problem with the way that police and policing is configured in our society. I mean, that's you have to suspend total disbelief when they just say you don't want to judge too quickly. It could be a coincidence that, in Portland, they're pulling some guy off his bike and beating the hell out of him. And in Seattle, they're shooting, a media person in the eye, in the face with a canister. And, here they're pushing a 72-year-old man flat on his back. I mean, you have to ignore all of it.
Yep.
You have to ignore the message they're explicitly sending by doing that publicly to you, the public.
Yep. It's a rotten to the core institution. And if there are any good cops, this is the culture that they're up against everywhere that they are.
And I have no doubt that there are good cops. But it really is irrelevant in this regard.
Yeah.
And again, you can say, there are good cops, and the best thing we can do is make their jobs easier by taking a lot of, instead of them having to, be a jack of all trades, limit what their job is.
Honestly, I think it's like ICE. The only good thing a cop can do is quit.
I mean, I think ICE is even more problematic, frankly, from my perspective, because I don't even think there's an argument as to there's anything that they're doing that is worthwhile. And this isn't a situation with ICE that I think they're a rogue organization. This is not a situation with ICE where they've been given a broad mandate and it's, problematic because of that. I think ICE is problematic because they've expanded their own mandate. They're flying drones over Minneapolis. They are pursuing people just to harass them exclusively. There's no purpose to ICE, I think, that is even remotely rational.
Well, one of the things that Vitale does in his book is he shows that even those emergency purposes that we think of the cops as being good for, like stopping a murder in progress, they almost never do that. They almost never stop a violent crime in progress. And that is the primary argument, right, for why we need them.
Well, but even if they do it sometimes, then there is a number of police officers that it would be appropriate to have, available for those instances. But I don't think that there is a single time where ICE is actually doing something that is positive, in my mind. That's the difference.
I mean, they're both bad. Also, we've seen that cops are not accountable to anyone. Eric Garner was killed using an illegal chokehold. Outlying these things, it doesn't help.
Bullprog, I wanted to give a Minneapolis update since on my last call, I was being a bit of a glum bucket. The communities here are banding together and not getting distracted by the destruction. While it's sad, we will rebuild. We all took to the streets last weekend to clean, have neighborhood strategizing meetings, and meet everyone on our block. Even with the threat of being lit up by the police and National Guard, many of us still go out to keep watch on the authorities. They're doing something in our neighborhood. Donations and volunteers are coming in strong to help all the people without means or housing. We've had peaceful demonstrations all week and more to come. Keep up the pressure, everyone. Also, the person who gave Jacob Frey his mask took it back after he got booted from the protest. Oh, that's pretty funny. Hey, Bullprog, send us an email if you have some good places for people to donate, and we will call it out tomorrow. Know-it-all surgeon. Speaking of misinformation, there was a video getting shared on Twitter of a shooting taking place during protests last Monday in downtown Las Vegas. The woman screaming it was the National Guard shooting at innocent American people, which it wasn't. There happened to be a heavily armed man with body armor amongst the protesters that drew on the cops guarding the courthouse. Be careful, everyone, with this amount of misinformation. Solidarity. Colorado guy. One popular idea across the political spectrum right now is the idea of passing new federal jobs package. What would the MR crew like to see in this hypothetical jobs package? Would the Dems take back control in 2021? If the Dems take back control in 2021? Much love, everybody. Well, depending on where we're at with the virus, I would like to see a massive jobs program, but you start with giving massive funding to cities and states. So any of the cuts that they've made, which are necessarily of state workers and not the police, probably, or city workers and not the police, get rehired. But then there's a ton of different things that we can do on a federal level. I mean, all the ideas are out there. But yes, I would love to see a jobs program. I would love to see infrastructure and enhanced funding for education. I mean, the list is huge.
A just transition program for cops who are out of work now because we've shrank the police budgets.
Well, I mean, like Vitale said, is you build up these other institutions and the cops can migrate into those.
Yep.
There's no doubt in my mind that any given police force, 10 to 30% of the cops on day one, if you offered them the same benefits to go do a strictly social services or community involvement, they wouldn't be like, I'm gone. Yes, immediately.
Yeah, because there are no other decent middle-class jobs for working class people anymore. And like, there's a certain percentage of cops, I'm sure, like especially the white ones, not all white cops, but like lots of them want to be on a power trip, and it attracts psychos and it attracts racists and it attracts fascists. But there are a lot more cops, especially people of color, who would rather be doing something else if they could find a decent job that contributed to the community in a more positive way.
Gons. Somebody buy Sam a PlayStation. Christo. Westchester County residents should be advised to vote for the incumbent Anthony Scarpino in the upcoming primary for district attorney. While I really don't know much about Scarpino, his challenge of Mima Rocha should make any MR listeners' skin crawl. Yes. She's the one who said that about Bernie, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken. Also, I can't remember what district it is. Or Torres. There's a district in New York that is on the cusp of electing a, well, you know what, I'll go through this tomorrow because also Mondaire Jones. There's a couple of places that are really important for folks to get out and help in New York. Renoir Cardo, you're totally right, Sam. Disinvest sounds a lot better than defund. Again, messaging from the left needs to be smart and more concise. Dad, if the cops aren't pigs, then why do they have hot dog necks? I don't think I get that. The other Biden, if Representative Elliot Engel truly believes in democracy, he should demand that the ballot gives zero indication that Engel is the incumbent, because it's unfair for that to bias how low information voters vote. Indeed. Adam, Manuel Ellis was asphyxiated by the police in Tacoma, Washington on March 3rd, 2020. The officers responsible need to be fired and prosecuted. Chief of police needs to be fired. The mayor was part of the cover-up and was not forthcoming with the family. She needs to resign. Justice for Manny. For more on how to help, go to facebook.com, justice-for-Manuel-Ellis. Lewis, anyone concerned that the likes of Colin Powell are setting the stage for Biden to pick a Republican VP?
Oh boy.
My initial gut prediction last year was Condoleezza Rice, but nothing would surprise me at this point. I think that would be a massive political mistake. I mean, obviously, I don't want that to happen from an ideological perspective, but I think it would be a massive mistake. I mean, you have 50% of the people, I think, under the age of 40 are voting for Biden unenthusiastically. They'll vote for him. I have very little doubt that they will vote for him. Like 60% of the people voting for Biden, who say they are going to vote for Biden, are voting to vote against Trump. And then there's, I think, 39% are voting for Biden. When you, out of that 60% who are voting to vote against Trump, you know, the Democrats have this strategy, like, don't do any harm. Don't do anything and let Trump sink himself. And it seems to be working. Joe Biden's not giving any reason for anybody not to vote against Trump. He's not getting in the way of that. The numbers look very good for Joe Biden right now, particularly relative to when people were running for re-election, like George Herbert Walker Bush, and when Jimmy Carter were running for re-election, and particularly relative to Clinton and Obama and Kerry. Joe Biden's numbers look good. Hillary Clinton never got above 50% in any polling average ever in the lead up to the election, which we should have been a little bit more attuned to. Everybody broke for Trump. Joe Biden is above 50%. So the only thing that can happen now from where he is he does something so dumb that those people who want to go out and vote against Trump say, oh, Joe Biden's making it really hard for me because all I want to do is vote against Trump. And now I got to put a check mark next to Joe Biden and some Republican. If Joe Biden does not communicate to the American people, never mind just Democrats, never mind the left, but to the American people, that he understands that Republicans are part of the problem, he's going to sink himself, I think.
Yeah, that's the entire case that he's made for himself, is I'm better than the Republicans.
Well, the entire case he's made has been, I'm better than Trump. He shifted. Like, you remember he was saying like 4 months ago, as soon as Trump, goes away, the Republicans are going to revert back to normal.
Right. Fever's going to break.
I think over the past couple of months, he's been, realizes that's not tenable. And, but who knows what's in his heart.
If I was him, if I was an advisor, I'd say keep saying that stuff about working with Republicans, because when they ultimately just block you at every stage, then you can,
make
use
your
it.
turn.
I tried, guys, but don't actually believe it, I guess, would be the main advice.
I just think that there could be no bigger insult to the Black community than to say, I'm going to pick Condoleezza Rice, frankly, because she's a Republican, but she's Black. Like, that really, I just find it so hard to believe that they would be that stupid. That would just be stupid. It would be just so stupid.
I mean, we had on a guest about how being a Democrat is an important part of Black identity in this country. So picking a Black Republican is not going to work. It's going to backfire.
Oh my God. It would be such an insult. It would be such an insult.
But I don't know what their strategy is. I guess they want the moderate Republicans. They're trying again to get these mythical suburban moderates and never Trump Republicans. And they take Black voters for granted, and they take the left for granted, because at the end of the day, they're probably going to fall in line to get Trump out of there. We'll see.
That's the strategy. And Winara, funding, not finding. Not sure I get that. Betsy DeVos, never in a million years did I think a bunch of normies would be calling to defund and even abolish the police. Binder Dad, how about going on Doomed with Matt Binder? By the way, mask, dad cap, and bandana arrived today. I'm happy to go on Doomed. I think Matt asked me like weeks ago, and then I don't think I heard from him again about it. Johnny, have anyone read Rutger Bregman's new book, Humankind, A Hopeful History? Can we get him on? I think we are like trying to get that book, right, Brendan?
Yeah. We're talking to him, trying to set up a date.
Bunker Inspector, Sam's Tinder profile. Swipe right for a man who thinks 7 minutes, 50 seconds constitutes a quickie. That's funny because we were actually talking about the length of the quickie last night. Hey, in these tough times, I wrote a joke to cheer everyone up. Here it is. Michael Tracy, more like Dick Tracy. Sam Harris, more like Dick Harris. Jordan Peterson, more like Dick Peterson. Dave Rubin, more like Dick Rubin.
Nailed it.
Yeah, nailed it. Do you even know who Dick Tracy is?
Is it a comic book character?
He's like a gumshoe sort of fellow.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Josh from Chicago. I'm very worried about Ben Shapiro. His favorite team is the Chicago White Sox, and their 2-star players were the first 2 players to speak out in support of the protests and against police brutality. Lucas Giolito even joined Color of Change. I hope he isn't sad enough to become a Cubs fan.
I don't sense sports as a big part of Shapiro's personality, but
who knows?
I'm not an everyday listener, I guess. Sam's
upper lip caterpillar. Oh, okay. Just bought the Majority Report bandana. I'm going to wear it at work and spread the message. Left is best. Alexis485. If we wonder how to deal with violent crimes and rape without the police, I would check how well police deal with these societal problems now. Still illegal for police to rape people while on the job. It is still legal for police to rape people while on the job in 37 states. Try talking to any women or femme person who has tried to report sexual assaults or rape and see how that went for them. Police, even now, crack, I think, just under 60% of solved cases in murders. Oh, put a pin in that for a second. Most murders are committed by people who know the victim, and 1/3 of the people killed by strangers are killed by cops. There's a lot of very well-established scholarship on dealing with even these problems without the police. I'm thinking of many feminist and black scholarship in restorative and transformative community-based justice. Please check out the works of scholars like Ruth Wilson Gilmore in Prison Abolition. Somebody has to put the Dad Charlie Brown song over that Jacob Fry video, by the way. There is a book, and I haven't read it, but I've been a couple of people have suggested it to me, and it is called It's by an LA Times reporter. Let me see if I can find it. And the suggestion about that, with so many of those crimes that are not solved, many of them happen in the it is called Ghetto Side, a true story of murder in America. And part of the argument is that in some ways, in terms of like dealing with actual crimes rather than harassment in black communities, the police do not put any resources into actually solving any crimes. They just put all their resources into policing just people just who happen to live in the neighborhood, as opposed to actually solving crimes.
Yep. It's an occupying force.
Yes. And I think the suggestion is that they should put more resources into actually solving crimes, as opposed to just basically criminalizing everybody. But all right, let's take one more call. Jamie, do you want to pick a number?
7.
707 is the number. Calling from a 707 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. It's Joe from California.
Joe from California. You, sir. The final caller of the day.
Yes. Wow, I feel real lucky. I was on the phone the whole time, and I was afraid I wasn't going to get the chance.
Well, a lot of people did not get a chance so that you could. So make it good.
Well, thank you, everyone, for your sacrifice. I called you months ago talking about my little brother, and you told me to try to get him to vote for Cory Booker. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't. I'm very curious about the context in which I would have said to have him vote for Cory Booker, but go ahead.
Well, I was just saying that he was probably going to vote for like Liz Warren or someone who is actually a threat to like Bernie, and you were saying just sideline him for someone who's going to not at all have a chance. It was a joke, but yeah. Anyway,
I think that might have been a Michael Day.
So
yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah, you clipped it. It was cool. But anyway, so I was calling to give you some sort of on the ground like information about what's going on in like San Francisco right now.
Okay.
So I work at a grocery store in the middle of downtown San Francisco, and things are pretty crazy right now, obviously. Between the protests and homeless people who are being completely ignored, and who constitute 75% of the coronavirus cases that we've had here.
Wow.
And they're not being given masks. We're told not to give them masks. It's not at the store, but I mean from like the police and everything like that. But what's going on right now is, I went to the protest on the 4th. It was totally peaceful. It was really cool. There was over 10,000 people. I've never seen that many cops in my life, in the same place.
Right.
And what happened yesterday, and I posted about this because I was so angry about it. I'm just enraged about the situation. Is I walked over to a restaurant that was still open to get lunch, and I saw at least 30 cops, between cops and sheriff's department, just chilling in like groups of 5 with these giant bats, equipped to the teeth, just sitting there in these little gangs on the corners. And, there's no protest, there's no action going on. They're just on the streets, all over the streets. And at the same time, at my store, we have people shoplifting and confronting our managers and getting in literal fist fights with our managers and slashing people like with like box cutters, and like,
jeez.
Yeah. And like last night, we kicked this guy out of the store. A whole gang of us had to kick this guy out of the store. And he like came back and stole the bicycle wheels off of a friend of mine's bike as revenge against us. But it was a customer, it wasn't a crew member. And the point is that the Walgreens around the corner has 3 cops. And I went up to one of them and I said, "Hey, how do we get one of you guys at my store? How do we get someone to post up at the store, at the door, so that we can maybe deter people, from doing this stuff to us?" And he looks at me and he literally like chuckles and he goes, "Pay me." And I said, "What do you mean pay you?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm off duty. The Walgreens is hiring me privately." And I just kind of gave him a look, and he goes, yeah, but I have all the same rights, legal rights as a normal officer. I can call backup, I can make arrests, I can do all that stuff, but I'm being paid privately. And the hypocrisy of that, and the fact that that they're ignoring our store completely. There's cops everywhere, but there's not one single one who's coming to help us with this crazy guy who's stealing bottles of booze and stuff, and then punching our manager in the face. It's just incredible.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's a racket.
Ridiculous. Well, hang in there.
I just want to let everyone know that like that's the level of the black and white of this situation with the way that they are not serving and protecting.
Have you tried to tell the story to your city council person?
No, it just happened yesterday. I mean, it's been building, but yesterday was like really like a breaking point for me.
You should do that. I would imagine that the city council people don't get a ton of calls. I bet you they get, in San Francisco, I bet you they get a decent amount. But I imagine that somebody will hear your story and find it compelling.
We should add that to the reforms. If you're a police officer and you're being paid by a private company to protect that company, you should be draped in their logo like a NASCAR. Like,
yes,
you should not look like a police officer.
You shouldn't have a badge on.
Yes, you should not have the same rights as a police officer because you're not functioning as a police officer.
Yeah.
Appreciate the call.
You
man.
certainly shouldn't be bragging about it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Sam. I appreciate you taking the time.
All right. Thanks, man.
People are afraid that there's going to be like private militias and security forces if we defund the police. That's already happening.
Right. All right. That was the final call of the day. Hey, folks, let's leave you on this happy note. We'll listen to this video and then we'll take 3 more IMs. But folks, it's all coming back. Pay no attention to the fact that our employment numbers, and the BLS is not being funky here, but there is the unemployment rate is lower than really it actually is, and there's an asterisk in the BLS report. That's okay. It's apples to apples comparison. The unemployment rate definitely did go down. We're still astronomically huge. We are hoping, despite the fact that the number of cases in the country is increasing, that we're not going to have a second wave. And we are going to watch an enormous amount of austerity take place, particularly on a city and state level going forward, because they've been crushed by the lack of tax receipts over the past couple of months. And as it stands now, the federal government doesn't appear to be doing anything. But Larry Kudlow, same guy who just literally months before the financial crisis in 2008 was saying, we're not in any type of crisis. There is no problem whatsoever. I remember this. He was almost the exact same tone, but I think at that time he probably wasn't indulging in things in the way that he might indulge in them now. But here he is shooting a really nice, soft background and soft focus, sort of like feel good piece to set you off for your day, the rest of your day, folks. Larry Kudlow.
America is coming back. 3 million new jobs, lower unemployment rate, furloughed temporary layoffs, going back to work, green shoots popping up everywhere, stocks are soaring, POTUS policies are working. Stay with the winners, Trump and Pence and me. The best is yet to come.
What?
That's the real Matthew Lesko energy there.
Totally. That's exactly right. That's exactly what it is.
You can get money for free. There's so much money available from the government. It's great.
I want someone to take that video and put question marks all over his suit. And that will. But folks, if that can't carry you through the rest of the day, I don't know what can. Let's just answer 3 more IMs and get out of here. Amy Fair, I don't know what alternatives would be more expensive. Are social workers paid more than police? No. And supportive housing is less expensive than jail. Well, no, but you need to deal with these social problems, and that's going to cost money. And frankly, you should be paying social workers more money.
Yeah. I mean, just think about the percentage of the population that would come into contact with even a means tested program versus the percentage of the population that comes into contact with the carceral state and the amount of time that they're in contact with it for.
Teacher Lauren, part of disinvesting in police needs to include getting cops out of schools. We need to shift that investment to school psychologists and social workers, without a doubt. They expect us to mitigate the ills of poverty and capitalism. Instead of providing appropriate support, they stick an armed a-hole in the hallways. And the final IM of the day. JJ Cool, hey Sam, I think the dumb left is incapable of competing with MR on any level. Instead, they play to people's emotions and exaggerate positions to hide their own deficiency. Ultimately, MR ends up with the smartest audience on the internet. That is very kind of you to say, and very accurate. All right, folks, see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught. Could see the truth in a lie.